My friends, today I want to share something that shook me to the core. Something so real, so divine, that it changed the way I see power, leadership, and the world around us. God showed me him removed from power. Not in a rumor, not in speculation, but in a vision, in a moment so vivid it cannot be ignored. And through it, he taught me lessons that every person must hear. We live in a world where power seems permanent. We watch leaders rise, conquer, and dominate, but God reminded me, and he reminds all of us, that no throne is permanent when it is held without righteousness. Pride may build a kingdom, arrogance may shield it for a time, but heaven sees the truth. When pride rises too high, God will always bring it down. No human hand can stop what God has planned. The higher a person climbs on the ladder of power, the closer they are to a fall if their heart is far from him. God also reminded me that the throne belongs to him, not to man. Leadership is a responsibility, a stewardship, a sacred trust. It is not a place to indulge selfish ambition or to impose fear on others. Those who forget that they are servants first, who start to play gods themselves, will face God's intervention. The authority we hold is only loaned, and when it is abused, heaven will reclaim it. The strongest walls, the fiercest armies, the loudest voices cannot stop what God ordained. He is the ultimate king, and his judgment is absolute. But here is what is often overlooked. God does not act in isolation. He acts in response to the cries of the oppressed, to the voices silenced by injustice, to the hearts broken by corruption and cruelty. Heaven hears what the world often ignores. The suffering of the innocent, the tears of those denied justice are not lost. God listens, and when the time is right, he moves with precision. Those who abuse power will be removed, not because man says so, but because God commands it. Justice delayed is not justice denied when God is the judge. Finally, and most importantly, God's removal of someone from power is never random. It is always a part of his greater plan. What looks like a sudden end, a shocking fall, is often the beginning of a divine shift. God clears the way for his purposes, for truth to rise, for righteousness to be established. Even when we do not understand the timing, even when the world is confused, God's strategy unfolds perfectly. His glory is revealed, his plans come to pass, and those who trust him will witness his power in ways that surpass human understanding. Friends, power is fleeting, but God's authority is eternal. Pride will fall, injustice will be answered, and God's purposes will always prevail. If you are watching leaders rise and fall, remember this. It is not chaos, it is divine order. God is always at work, and he sees everything. He will remove what must be removed, and he will elevate what must be elevated. Let this be a reminder to all of us. Stay humble, stay righteous, and trust in the God who sees all. For he is the true king, and no one remains in power without his will. There is a lesson that echoes through every era, across every nation, and into every life. Pride has a way of blinding even the most powerful, and God has a way of humbling even the mightiest. I saw it, I felt it, and I cannot unsee it. Pride is deceptive. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. It whispers in the heart, telling a person that their strength is theirs alone, that their victories are earned by their own hands, that their influence and authority are untouchable. At first, it seems harmless, a small confidence, a sense of accomplishment. But pride is a seed that grows rapidly if left unchecked, and what begins as a whisper soon becomes a roar that drowns out reason, humility, and even morality. I have witnessed how pride can distort vision. A person who once served others with compassion can slowly start to believe that service is unnecessary, that the world exists to honor them rather than the other way around. Decisions are no longer made with wisdom or fairness, but with ego and self-interest. The higher a person rises, the more dangerous this becomes. Those who climb to positions of influence can begin to see themselves as untouchable, as if they have transcended the laws of accountability and the rules of justice. They forget that every gift, every opportunity, every power comes not by their merit alone, but by God's grace. And when this forgetfulness takes root, downfall is not a question of if, but when. Pride isolates. It builds invisible walls around the heart, walls that separate a person from truth, from advice, from the voices of conscience. Even those closest, those who have supported or trusted them, are seen as threats or obstacles. God speaks to the humble through many channels, through warnings, through counsel, through circumstances designed to redirect them. But pride deafens. A person steeped in pride refuses to see beyond themselves. They believe the throne they occupy is their own by right, their legacy untouchable, their influence eternal. Yet God's word reminds us that He opposes the proud and lifts up the humble. No matter how secure power seems, it is always under His watchful eye. History itself is a testimony to this truth. Every great empire, every powerful leader, every person who thought themselves untouchable, has eventually faced a moment of reckoning. Some were toppled suddenly in a way that shocked the world. Others fell slowly, their influence eroded piece by piece as God removed the support they had taken for granted. What all of them had in common was pride, an overestimation of self and an underestimation of God. And in each case, God acted with perfect timing, ensuring that justice was served, that humility was restored, and that His sovereignty was made unmistakably clear. Pride also clouds judgment. Those who are consumed by it begin to make choices not based on what is right or just, but on what preserves their image, their power, their legacy. They surround themselves with yes men, dismiss warnings, and ignore the whispers of conscience. In the end, every decision made in arrogance sets the stage for eventual failure. What seemed like clever strategy becomes the instrument of downfall. What was thought to be strength becomes vulnerability. And all the while, God watches patiently, allowing the consequences of pride to unfold naturally, revealing truth to all who have eyes to see. But the lesson is not only for those who wield power in high offices or positions of authority. Pride touches all of us in ways large and small. It can manifest as insisting on always being right, as looking down on others, as clinging stubbornly to control. And in every case, God's principle remains the same. Pride will be brought low. His interventions may not always be dramatic or public, but they are purposeful. He will humble hearts, shift circumstances, and redirect paths until the lesson of humility is learned. And herein lies the hope and the warning intertwined. God does not bring down the proud to destroy them arbitrarily. He does it to awaken them, to remind them that every gift, every authority, every position is temporary and accountable. Pride may build empires, but only God's grace sustains them. Those who resist the lesson fall. Those who embrace it rise, not by their own strength, but by aligning with the divine will. So when I saw him removed from power, I understood this truth more deeply than I ever had before. The fall was not sudden without reason. It was the natural consequence of pride, the inevitable result of forgetting that God alone is the ultimate authority. All the influence, all the wealth, all the power, none of it can withstand the hand of God when pride has clouded the heart. Pride may give temporary satisfaction, but its end is always humility enforced. God's justice is not always visible to the eyes of men at first, but it is unstoppable. It may come in ways that surprise, in moments that shock, but it comes precisely when it is needed. And when it does, it leaves no doubt that God alone holds the final verdict. Every person, no matter how mighty, must remember that their life, their authority, their influence is entrusted to them, not owned by them. And those who refuse to remember will inevitably learn the hard way that God will humble them. Let this be a warning and a guide. Never allow pride to take root in your heart. Seek humility, listen to correction, honor God above all, and remember that no throne is beyond his reach. Pride may rise, but God's hand is higher. And when pride reaches its peak, God's justice brings it down, always. Power is often viewed as a prize, as something to be captured, defended, and held at all costs. Leaders rise, empires expand, and influence spreads across nations. Yet God reminded me in a way that shook my very spirit. No throne belongs to man. Every seat of authority, every position of influence, every crown or title we see in this world is temporary, fragile, and ultimately accountable to him. Too many have believed that their power was theirs by right, that their authority was permanent, that their reign was untouchable. But God's truth is unwavering. Leadership is never owned, it is entrusted, and when it is abused, it will be reclaimed. The lesson begins with the nature of authority. Humans often mistake authority for autonomy. They believe that the power they hold gives them freedom to act without accountability. They see the throne as a fortress from which they are untouchable, a platform from which they can impose their will without consequence. But in reality, authority is a sacred trust. God places individuals in positions of leadership not to exalt them, but to serve others, to steward resources wisely, to protect the vulnerable, and to uphold justice. When leaders forget this, when they begin to act as if the throne legitimizes their pride or greed, they cross a line that cannot remain unchecked. I witnessed this truth vividly. The higher a person sits on the throne, the more visible their actions become, and the more accountable they are. God does not tolerate misuse of power. No human law, no army, no system of defense can shield a person from divine oversight. It is easy for those in authority to think their influence is absolute, that their decisions are final, that no one can challenge them. But God reminds us in the most unmistakable ways, every throne is his, and every ruler answers to him. The moment a leader forgets this, the moment they act as though the crown is theirs alone, the foundation beneath them begins to shake. Power is a test, not a possession. When God places someone in authority, he watches how they respond. Do they lead with justice, compassion, and humility, or do they seek personal gain, manipulate others, and ignore the needs of those under their care? The throne is not a reward for pride. It is a responsibility to be carried with fear of God and respect for truth. And those who forget this lesson, who treat the throne as a pedestal for ego, will inevitably face removal. The world may not understand it immediately, but God's intervention is precise and unstoppable. What appears as sudden collapse or shocking removal is often the natural consequence of acting against divine order. I also realize that the illusion of permanence is powerful. Those who sit in high places often believe their legacy will endure forever. They imagine their influence will be felt for generations, that their name will be immortalized. Yet God showed me that all of this is fleeting. Thrones crumble, kingdoms fall, and reputations fade when they are built on pride, corruption, or self-interest. Authority granted by God is conditional upon obedience to his principles. Ignore him, and the throne becomes a trap rather than a platform. Misuse it, and it becomes a stage for public humiliation and divine correction. Another striking truth is that the throne is both a privilege and a responsibility. Privilege because it is God himself who chooses and places the leader, not humans. Responsibility because God expects accountability for every decision, every word, every action. Leadership is not a tool for personal gain, but a platform for service. Those who rise to power without this understanding invite disaster. God's removal of such individuals is not vindictive. It is restorative. It reminds the world and the leaders themselves that the ultimate authority is never in human hands. The most sobering part of this revelation is the permanence of God's judgment versus the temporary nature of human power. A person may seem untouchable for years, may wield influence over nations, may amass wealth, followers, and armies, but in God's eyes, none of this secures their position. Every throne is conditional, every crown temporary, every authority accountable. And when the time comes, God acts. Sometimes it is gradual, stripping influence piece by piece, allowing the world to see the truth unfold. Other times it is swift, sudden, and shocking, leaving no doubt that divine authority is higher than any human seat of power. This truth should awaken fear and humility in the hearts of all who lead. It should remind us that God is the ultimate ruler, the one who sets up kings and removes them according to his will. No matter how strong, how popular, how untouchable a leader seems, the throne always belongs to God. It is his sovereignty that upholds it, his judgment that governs it, his hand that can remove it at any moment. And for those who recognize this, it is also a call to responsibility, a call to lead with integrity, with justice, with humility, and with reverence for the one who placed them there. I saw this revelation vividly, him removed from power, not because of human plotting, not because of a conspiracy, but because the throne is never truly his. It was never his to cling to, never his to claim, never his to abuse. God reminded me that the ultimate authority is his alone, and when man forgets this, when pride and selfish ambition overshadow obedience, divine intervention is inevitable. So let all of us take heed. Leadership is a sacred trust, not a reward. Every authority we hold is under God's watchful eye. The throne is not a human possession. It is a divine appointment to be exercised with fear, respect, and humility. Those who forget this truth will be reminded, sometimes in shocking ways, that God alone rules the nations, God alone controls power, and God alone decides who sits and who falls. There is a truth that cannot be ignored. God hears the cries of the oppressed. The world may turn a blind eye to injustice. Leaders may ignore the suffering, systems may fail, and people may be silenced. But heaven is never deaf. Every tear, every whispered plea, every heartbroken sigh reaches God's ears, and he acts. I saw this truth revealed in a way that shook me to the core. God showed me him removed from power, and I understood immediately that it was not simply about politics, strategy, or human ambition. It was about justice, about the cries of those who could not defend themselves. The oppressed are often invisible to the world. Their pain is quiet, their suffering hidden, their voices drowned out by power, wealth, and authority. But God notices. Every injustice, every act of cruelty, every abuse of power is recorded in the heavens. And he is never slow in responding. There is a divine balance in the universe, a perfect justice that cannot be manipulated or delayed indefinitely. When those in authority forget their responsibility to care for the vulnerable, When they allow oppression to flourish unchecked, God moves. His timing may seem mysterious, his methods may seem unexpected, but his action is certain. I witnessed how the cries of the innocent stir the hand of God. Those who are silenced on earth are never forgotten in heaven. A child denied justice, a family robbed of peace, a nation oppressed by corruption and greed. All these prayers, though seemingly unanswered, are never lost. They rise like incense before God, and He listens. He weighs the hearts of leaders, He examines their actions, and He prepares a response. Sometimes the response is patient, allowing pride and corruption to reveal themselves fully. Other times the response is swift, shocking the world, removing those who have held power illegitimately, and restoring balance in ways no human could orchestrate. Oppression tempts humans to despair because they cannot see the larger picture. They feel powerless, voiceless, abandoned. But God assures us through His actions that no cry is wasted, no suffering is unseen, and no injustice is permanent when He intervenes. The removal of those in power who abuse their authority is often the direct result of these cries reaching heaven. It is a reminder to all of us that God is not passive. He does not sit idly by while His children suffer. Every tear, every plea, every heartfelt prayer is an arrow aimed straight at the heart of injustice, and it pierces through the walls of human arrogance and pride. There is also a lesson here for those who wield influence. Leaders, rulers, and those in authority must remember that their decisions affect real people. Every abuse of power, every act of oppression, every time they ignore the cries of those under their care, they place themselves under divine scrutiny. God hears, God watches, and when the line is crossed, when mercy is ignored and justice denied, He acts decisively. What may appear to be stability, what may seem like invincible power, can vanish in a moment when God intervenes on behalf of the oppressed. The cries of the oppressed are more than complaints. They are a call for divine intervention. They carry weight that cannot be measured by earthly standards. God responds not out of anger alone, but out of righteousness, justice, and love for those who suffer. He removes those who misuse authority to protect the vulnerable, to restore balance, and to remind the world that no human power is beyond His judgment. It is a principle that has been repeated throughout history. Kingdoms rise and fall, leaders are exalted and deposed, and the powerless are lifted up through the intervention of God. I saw it clearly. The removal of him from power was not simply about failure, greed, or incompetence. It was a direct answer to cries that had been ignored for too long. The oppressed had prayed, even when it seemed like no one was listening, and God responded. The throne that once seemed unshakable crumbled, not by human hands, but by divine justice. This is a reminder to all of us that God's justice is not delayed, even if it seems invisible. It is precise, purposeful, and unavoidable. This truth is both comforting and sobering. Comforting because every act of suffering is seen, every tear matters, and every plea reaches the one who rules over all. Sobering because no act of oppression goes unnoticed, and those who misuse power will face consequences beyond what humans can impose. The cries of the oppressed are a testimony to the moral order established by God. When heaven listens, it sets into motion a chain of events that restores justice, balances scales, and humbles the proud. So let this be a lesson to everyone, especially those in positions of power. Never ignore the cries of the oppressed. Every voice matters, every tear is noticed, every act of injustice is recorded. God is listening, and His intervention may come in ways you do not expect, in ways that shake the foundations of human authority. And when it does, It will be undeniable, powerful, and transformative. The removal of him from power is a testament to this divine truth. It is proof that heaven does not remain silent, that justice is not delayed forever, and that every act of oppression will ultimately be answered. God's ears are open, his hand is active, and his justice is perfect. Those who suffer can take heart, and those in power must take warning. For in God's eyes every cry matters, and no one stands above his judgment. One of the most shocking truths I discovered is that God's actions are never random. When he removes someone from power, it is never simply to punish, to humiliate, or to create chaos. Every act of divine removal is part of a larger, perfect plan, one that our human minds may struggle to comprehend. I saw him removed from power, and at first it seemed devastating, confusing, even unfair to those who did not understand. But as God revealed the sequence of events, the bigger picture became undeniable. This removal was the opening act of a greater plan, a divine orchestration that would bring justice, restore balance, and reveal his glory in ways no human hand could. God's ways are higher than our ways. What looks like a sudden fall, a shocking loss, or an unexpected upheaval is often the first step in a carefully designed divine strategy. The throne that seems lost, the influence that appears shattered, and the power that seems gone are all pieces of a puzzle only God can see. He removes what must be removed to make way for what must be revealed. It is not chaos, it is design, it is not failure, it is preparation, and it is in these moments that we must learn to trust God's timing, his wisdom, and his vision. I realized that this principle applies not just to leaders or those in positions of power, but to every aspect of life. God often removes situations, opportunities, relationships, or circumstances from our lives that we cling to as permanent or essential. It may feel like loss, like devastation, like the end of a dream, but in truth, it is the first step towards something far greater. The removal is always purposeful. It clears the path, removes obstacles, and creates space for God's plan to unfold. What seems like an ending is often a beginning in disguise. When God removed him from power, it was not merely to humble him or to punish arrogance. It was to set in motion a series of events that would reveal divine truth to the world. The fall exposed pride, revealed injustice, and created an opportunity for righteousness to rise. God's hand was evident in every detail, every timing, every consequence. Those who only saw the collapse missed the bigger picture. The removal was a necessary act to establish a new season, a new order, and a deeper revelation of his sovereignty. This is a truth that many fail to see. Humans tend to interpret divine action in immediate terms: punishment, reward, success, failure. But God's vision stretches beyond the immediate. He sees the ripple effects, the long-term consequences, and the ultimate outcome. When he removes someone from power, it is not just about that person. It is about everyone affected by their influence. It is about restoring justice, uplifting the oppressed, and creating opportunities for truth and righteousness to prevail. Every fall orchestrated by God is a setup for his larger plan. I also saw that God's removal of power serves as a lesson for all. It reminds the world that no one is beyond accountability, no matter how strong or influential they seem. But it also reminds the faithful that God's plans are infallible. What appears as chaos, scandal, or confusion is actually divine strategy at work. His removal is always intentional, always calculated, always aligned with a purpose far greater than any human ambition. The throne may change hands, influence may shift, and authority may be disrupted, but God's plan advances, unstoppable and perfect. In these moments, faith becomes essential. Those who witness divine removal may feel fear, uncertainty, or doubt, especially when the person removed held significant power, but understanding that God's hand is guiding every step changes everything. The removal is not an end. It is preparation for the next phase. God creates openings where none existed, opportunities where doors seemed closed, and clarity where confusion reigned. He removes what obstructs his purpose so that his plan can flourish fully. Finally, I realized that God's plan is not only about correcting the present, but also about shaping the future. When someone is removed from power, it sends a message, establishes a precedent, and sets a new course for generations. It reshapes society, redirects resources, and influences decisions in ways that human observers cannot immediately measure. What seems like loss or defeat is actually a strategic move in God's grand design, ensuring that His will is accomplished, His justice is realized, and His glory is revealed. The fall of the powerful is never meaningless, and it is never final in God's eyes. Every removal is a signal that God is in control, that He orchestrates history, and that He transforms endings into beginnings. It is a reminder that what appears as devastation in the moment is often preparation for a divine breakthrough, a setup for a season where His plans unfold in ways far beyond human imagination. When I witnessed Him removed from power, I understood that this was God's divine choreography at work. It was not mere coincidence, not political maneuvering, not human intervention. It was the deliberate, intentional, and perfect plan of God, and it left me with an unshakable truth. God's removal is never random. It is always a setup for His greater plan. Those who trust Him, who seek His will, and who remain faithful will see that what looks like a fall is actually a foundation for a future filled with purpose, justice, and divine glory.